Feeling bored? Lethargic? Looking for a scintillating 15 to about 20 minutes of sweaty man action? Well, you found it, because tonight you're gonna settle on watching Monday Night Muscle Masters!
Let's do this!
On our last show, we put WCW NWO Revenge through the gauntlet, and while it came out with a few bruises, it still proved to the world that... But we also heard you muscle maniacs out there loud and clear on who you wanted us to call up next from developmental to get their big push. Wow, this day certainly has been coming for a long time, and I think we all knew this reckoning was near, so I proudly present to you Zen Nihon Pro Wrestling Fight Upon! Released in 1994 for the Super Famicom and developed by Natsume, Zen Nihon Pro Wrestling Fight Upon goes on a comedic bend that what? Come on, alright, see, the problem with all you wrestling video game fans is that you're a plague. All you do is take. You think you know what you like, but I'll tell you what to like, and that is fight the goddamn pawn. Boo! Look, you can boo and you can chant all you want. It doesn't matter, because Day of Reckoning 2 is too much of a cowherd to show up on Monday Night Muscle Match. Okay, fine. Alright, okay. Day of Reckoning 2 it is. Let's do it. THQ saw success in the early PlayStation 2 days with the SmackDown series, starting with Just Bring It, since both the GameCube and the Xbox were a bit late to the party, and Yuke's was the only developer available. This was due to, Aki being busy having their work on Mayhem 2 flush down the TL hopper, because Vince bought WCW, thus ruining everything for everyone. The SmackDown series mostly became a PlayStation exclusive during the early aughts, but once the GameCube bounced onto the scene, Yuke's was split into two groups and started pumping out game after game after game to see what would stick. This trend first started with WrestleMania X8, a game that had the star power of both Brother and Luke Hobbs on the cover, but was woefully underbaked in the gameplay, graphical, and match mode departments. 2 years later, Yuke's followed up with WrestleMania 19, with its only notable feature being the ability to destroy Vince's fleet of ships. After that misfire, THQ decided to switch tact, dropped the WrestleMania line for the GameCube, transplanted it over to the Xbox, and had Yuke's develop Day of Reckoning to replace the Mania line. Wow, how very swervy of you. Now, while this would normally be seen as a recipe for disaster, the engine saw an across-the-board improvement because of it, and its big focus being on a storyline mode that revolved around your Kaw fighting over the heavyweight title. This gamble worked, and Day of Reckoning pulled in positive reviews and sales numbers. Still not quite up to the levels that Smackers was getting, but for being on a much smaller install base, it was a step in the right direction. THQ and Yuke's then immediately followed up with a sequel, really immediately the very next year, with WWE Day of Reckoning 2. To give you some perspective, Yuke's managed to big papa pump out 12 separate wrestling games in 5 years.
I truly am incredible!
So now that we broke down how we got here, where the hell exactly are we? The Attitude boom was in its doldrums, and the PG era had not yet begun, so it's time for some ruthless aggression. For those that have no idea what that means, it's a thing that happened after the Attitude era, but before the PG one. So yeah, it's 2005, and the wrestling landscape has changed considerably. No Hardys, Dudleys, Bork Laser, Goldberg, The Rock, Steve Austin, or Mick Foley, well, kinda. Instead, make way for all those memorable Ruthless Aggression stars. The Masterpiece, Chris Masters, Carlito, Eugene, and on top of them all, Rene Dupree. Now, there's a bunch of reasons why a bunch of fans dropped off the product at this time, and I present to you some of them.
I went to pick up a little protection.
We have a crack staff here. Everyone on hand, I'm Dr. Heine.
I'm your father, Dominic.
Well, the only thing dead around here, Kane, is your baby.
He's got worms hanging out of his mouth. Look at it.
All these Japanese people, they scared of you.
Despite all this, WWE still had a lot of stars, with most of them being super, while the rest were pretty damn close. So, we have the Heartbreak Kid, who found his smile again, Edge and Christian, the Underwear Taker, Tra, Latino Heat, Drax, Ray Ray, John Cena, Ra's al Ghul, and finally, let's leave on a high note, Rob Van Dam. You might notice that a lot of those stars are from WCW NWO Revenge, which is due to the 2001 invasion, and let's stop talking about that now. This is an eclectic roster, besmirched with some stinkos, but thankfully you also have some gold, like Kurt Angle thrown into the mix.
And then you add Kurt Angle to the mix.
But with the departure of charisma lords like Dwayne, Steve, and Mick, it's really hard to follow up with performers that could hold a candle to them. Sorry, Paul London. I technically lied just now, but I guess WWE technically lied on some of their contracts, because despite Stone Cold and the Great One being released the year before, the WWE still retained the copyrights on their characters. This is due to them appearing as unlockables in a Legends section, which I guess is fine. Good to have them there, but it feels weird that both guys were considered legends when they were in the company just a few months prior. Also, they threw in Mick, Bret Hart, and the Hot Dog Skin Man. Weird that Bret Hart managed to get in there too, as he only first started to reappear on WWE programming a few months after Day of Reckoning 2's release. Also, how you unlock these legends in the game is kind of... huh? For Steve, Mick, and Bret, you have to beat the CPU in an exhibition match 5, 10, or 20 times. For the Hulkster, beat the story mode, and for Mr. Skyscraper, complete a specific part of the story mode. It's odd, but way better than, I don't know, hiding them behind a giant paywall and or season pass. When all is said and done though, I think overall, Day of Reckoning 2 is a solid B+ player. I mean, it's a good roster. It doesn't really compare to, say, the earlier SmackDowns, but given the era, it's about as good as you can hope. -1 point for having JBL.
JBL stands for just beat a lizard.
Now, in a fantastic turn of events, Day of Reckoning 2 draws a lot of parallels with the Aki engine, yay! But also just as many with the SmackDown series. Yay! That's actually really good, as some wrestling game fans prefer the faster, more arcadey-like feel of those earlier down smacks, while the right people prefer the slower, more technical Aki engine games. Seriously though, this is a very interesting concoction of both, because the strikes and grapples use the tap for a weak version and hold down for a stronger one method of Aki, while still maintaining the quick striking combos, overall speed, and the special move storing of the SmackDowns. The reversals also lean towards the Aki style, but you also have a ton of expanded countering, blocking, and reversing maneuvers here, but all of them are done with both shoulder buttons, keeping it simple to remember. The timing for reversals is also spot on, with it not being too strict nor too loose. You can bounce and fly off the ring from pretty much every angle, and there's some pretty unique options like directly canceling Irish whips into sudden clotheslines or even grapples, to keep your opponents guessing. There's also a more in-depth submission system that's new to this game that triggers once you've slapped on a hold. Choose one of the options that affects either wrestler's health or stamina, and if your opponent guesses the same, they'll break out. It's neat and it works, but doesn't really change things in any significant way. Finishing and signature moves are all here, and pretty much every position you can get in has a technique assigned to it, whether you're on the turnbuckle, the mat, or right in somebody's grill. I will say that sometimes it takes a bit too long to gain meter for these moves. It feels a bit slower than either Aki or Yuke's previous efforts, although that just might be a subjective thing. Still though, if you're a fan of either company's games, you should be able to wrap your head around the controls fairly easily. Now, like I mentioned before, the big new feature for Day of Reckoning 2 is the story mode. You can either create your own call from scratch or simply import the one you made in DOR 1 and transfer him into the new game.
But I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Okay, so THQ maintained at the time that DOR 2's Creator Wrestler was so advanced that the older models just wouldn't work well together.
What?
Even though both DOR games ran on the exact same engine, released only a year apart, I guess it just wasn't something feasible at the time. Anyway, what is on display here for the story mode is pretty fun and accurately reflects WWE storytelling in 2005. For worse. Character dialogue is written pretty faithfully to match up with the gimmicks, and the polished graphics for the time help things out from a presentation perspective. However, being on Nintendo's purple lunchbox does hamper things quite a bit, especially when compared to the PS2 games that were releasing alongside it. SmackDown vs. Raw features full voice acting for its story mode, as well as in-game commentary from Jerry Lawler and the lifeless husk known as Michael Cole. This is because, of course, the PS2 used DVDs, which could hold a lot more data over the cube's tiny little optical discs. I guess there's not much Yuke's could have done here.
It's not my fault.
To make up for the lack of voice acting, wrestler mouths and lip sync were seemingly animated by a madman, featuring some stretchy ass jowls and expressions that would creep out Lovecraft's skeleton. Now, with no match commentary, a wrestling game staple at that point, I guess Yuke's made up for this by blasting annoying music pretty much 24/7.
We need to play now and loud.
It's actually really distracting, and the tunes are just not good. Once you've listened to the same loop 17 times, you'll inevitably want to just turn it off. Well, guess what? You can't!
What?
Well, at least not in the middle of a match. You have to back out to the main menu, then go into the options to give your ears some rest. The problem here is that now the game feels a bit lifeless and empty, don't you think? Again, this might not have been an issue if commentary was possible on the GameCube discs, except for when you remember it was possible in N64 cartridges.
Stone Cold turns the tables! Not really. Mick Foley just reverted to idiocy, his natural state.
Like, it wasn't particularly good, but it was there. If you can live without all these presentational comforts, and with that particular discomfort, then you'll find a serviceable and entertaining story mode here, just lacking in some bells and whistles. Match types in general though, well, there's hardly anything to complain about here. Hardcore, table matches, cages, loads of ladders, TLC, Hell in a Cell, more tables, triple threat, fatal 4-way, Iron Man, Last Man Standing, and the most revered, royal, and dignified of all match steps, bra and panties.
Oh boy! Oh, there they are! Puppies!
Yeah, it's just about what it sounds like. While the Diva section is a little paltry in this game due to the distinct lack of Lita, she was under contract at this time, you do get a visit from the Keebler elf herself, so it's not all bad. The rest of the modes all work pretty well, certainly a lot less glitchy than what's on offer nowadays, with the TLC and Hell in a Cell offering up some great 4-player mayhem and still holds up today. The Creator Wrestler itself is also fairly robust, and has the expected features of a game released around this time, but of course pales in comparison to the online-focused WWE universe of today. One negative, however, is a lot of clothing and parts for this mode are locked to the WWE shop.com, and everything costs something, from hairstyles to just some basic clothing. This is a personal beef of mine. Your mileage may vary, but I feel it's okay when weapons, arenas, and wrestlers are locked in this way, but limiting your choices on how your caw could look seems a bit overkill. I mean, WF No Mercy had a few caw bits locked away at the
SmackDown Mall.
but it was usually pretty silly, superfluous stuff. At the end of the day, it's a minor gripe when you factor in the ability to make your own logos, textures, and entrances. There's no shortage of stuff to do in Day of Reckoning 2, which always goes a long way. This is the pinnacle of wrestling games on the GameCube. This is the pinnacle of WWE wrestling games on the GameCube, as the Wii would be released 1 year later. It's a shame THQ didn't continue this series on that platform, as the SmackDown titles would eventually become multi-platform and also become the de facto yearly based affair that kinda started sucking around here. But back in these early aughts, both Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft all got exclusive wrestling games for a few years, and while not all of them were amazing, they were all at least unique and offered a lot of choice to the highbrow bourgeoisie class that enjoys beating up half-naked polygonal men. Day of Reckoning 2 is unquestionably the best you can get if you had your feet planted squarely in that Nintendo stable, and it's an excellent one to go out with. So, if I were to plaster a skull face on it that would indicate a reasonable amount of enjoyment I had with it, it would have to be,
Word life.
Man, that's a great story, isn't it? I feel good.
Now, if you know of any other wrestling titles you'd like me to square off with in the ring, wave your sign in the audience below and I'll see what I can do. Unlike some other empty promises that have been made, believe me when I say, you guys are the authority. For Monday Night Muscle Masters and the greatest editing team in the world, good night, everybody!
What the hell?
We've got a tiger out here, and guess what? The tiger doesn't want to be here.